Truck Talk, brought to you by eTruckBiz.
Hi everyone, Ben Wheel welcoming you back and reminding you that this episode of Truck Talk is not endorsed, sponsored, approved, or otherwise affiliated with fedexground or any company other than eTruckBiz. Joining me today are our guest Jeff Thompson, the Director of Operations and Business Development for Columbia Industries, Sean Lunsford, the Operations Manager for CI Express in Lewiston, Idaho, and Dave Bowen, our own Director of Client Consulting and Training for eTruckBiz. Today's episode is about consulting and coaching business owners and operators. So welcome, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
Jeff, tell our listeners a little about your business background. How did you get into the FXG contracting space? Anything you have found surprising? What brought you to being involved in this?
Well, it's interesting. I probably, in my career, and I don't want to date myself with how many years, but probably overseeing 10 to 12 different businesses, if you will, maybe industries over the years, different types of industries from retail, manufacturing, transportation, restaurant, food manufacturing, so a ton of different businesses. I've been fortunate enough the last 20 years to work for a pretty unique company right here in Eastern Washington, Kennewick, Washington, called Columbia Industries. And really we're a nonprofit agency helping people with disabilities, barriers to employment, different things. And we've been around since 1963. And I've ran business and business operations for them. So a ton of experience, private sector coming in, and then learned a ton and done a ton for this company over these 20 years. So it's interesting. We look at Columbia Industries. The only reason we run business lines and for-profit businesses, and we have 4 different for-profit subsidiaries, is to create our own funding source and engines to fuel our nonprofit. So really, that's what we're trying to do, and we currently oversee multiple different business opportunities: 4 roundtable pizza restaurants, a bottled watering company, a shredding company, a record storage and digital imaging company, and then now a fedexground transportation company.
Well, we encourage our clients to really think about why they're in business, not what they're trying to do, because everybody's trying to make a profit, but why. And you guys certainly have a very unique and outstanding why you are in business. So I commend you for that.
I was going to say, if you ever heard the speaker Simon Sinek, he always talks about the why, and our why is pretty big. It's really about creating these funding engines and businesses to support our mission. I think, it's interesting why we even got in this business was just another engine, another financial engine, being a fedexground contractor to fund our mission. And that's what really got us into it. Our leadership did some strategic planning, and we came up with this was a pretty neat business. And we reached out and found one, and then lo and behold, here we are, in the business being a fedexground contractor.
So, Sean, tell our listeners a little bit about your background. My understanding is you are more involved in the day-to-day. So how did you and Jeff connect, and what's your responsibilities as operations manager?
I got into transportation through an ag inputs company back in 2016. Our job was bulk transport of fertilizer. So I got familiar with transportation and all the various rules and regulations in that space. Met Jeff through the job opportunity with Columbia Industries for CI Express. I was personally really excited by the opportunity to work for a company like Columbia Industries because of what it's doing and how it goes about its business. The idea of generating profit that helps serve these social functions is really rewarding. I mean, we all run a business to make a profit, and we try to run the best business we can, but there's that added bonus of knowing that when we do well, we're really helping people in our community. It's truly rewarding and really drives us to make sure we're doing everything we can to be the best business possible. So that's how Jeff and I met. My responsibilities include, like you said, some of the day-to-day operation. I'm fortunate to have a good team to work with. I really try as the operations manager just to make sure that the operation continues to run, that we're looking ahead, that we're anticipating problems, that we've solved problems for the drivers, not just on a daily basis, but on an ongoing basis, and also to make sure that the business succeeds by looking out for the bottom line, looking into the future, figuring out trends, planning ahead, and making sure that we're making good, wise choices to make sure we run a good business, we take care of our people, and we're helping to serve that greater function and greater mission of Columbia Industries.
That's super. Again, I commend you guys. So, Dave, tell our listeners a little bit about your background and coaching customers in the FedEx space.
Thanks, Ben. Well, I spent almost 35 years in transportation, 30 years specifically in the small package industry with two of the greatest leadership and operations companies in the world, UPS and fedexground. I also spent a little bit of time after fedexground in two executive positions with smaller transportation companies. My specialty over those years was performing turnarounds, helping move operations from mediocre to excellent operations, refining their processes, helped with multiple sorts, buildings, helped turn around a region, even a small medical transport company. So the coaching realm really works on evaluating, making sense of where everyone is at, and then defining and implementing a clear path to success. As a manager for many years with FedEx and UPS, I learned a lot about leadership and understanding where everybody's at, and then being very clear is how we move forward. I spent 23 years helping fedexground contractors understand and comply and holding them accountable to the operating agreement. Now I'm helping them on the other side work directly on how they can really fine-tune their operations in order to uphold the agreement and achieve both their financial goals and service goals.
So tell me, Dave, what's the biggest challenge you and your coaches see now and how we're helping with clients overcoming it?
It's really handling the change, the unknown and the unexperienced. In today's fast-moving world, there's so many changes coming. The business owners and the operators, that they have a big challenge trying to make sense of it, and then let alone implement a plan of action in order to keep high standards of service, take care of their employees, take care of the customers, and then also, generate a profit. Very important to understand that unknown or unexperienced. When you're working in an operation so closely, it can be challenging to understand the impacts and what's going on. And as a business coach, we come alongside just to observe, to listen, to understand, find out how each individual is doing within the operation, and then make suggestions to make sure they understand how they can make changes to get a clear path forward.
And just briefly, how did you meet Jeff and Sean?
It was actually through a referral from another CSP, one that has benefited from our services, been a longtime customer, and uses the coaching service to just keep track, like I just described, how he's doing in his operation. He saw that Jeff had a need and was struggling as Jeff was coming into this business, had great business talent, ran other transportation operations, but he was struggling to figure out how does my previous experience translate into the fedexground world. We worked together starting out from that referral and got together with Jeff actually early on, right after a peak season. So there were many lessons and experiences learned, some bruises that were experienced. And we started working together to figure out a path forward and help Jeff and his team understand and adapt their transportation skills and apply them in the fedexground world.
I understand. Well, we always appreciate word-of-mouth referrals. And just real quick, I'll get back to Jeff and Sean in just a second. But for our listeners, take them through the chronological steps of coaching BCs in the fedexground space. Like what kind of background work is done? How do you assess where to start?
First thing, like most businesses, it's a relationship business. We start out by just listening and getting to know the team, the story, the background, the skill sets they have, what successes they've had in the operation so far. Then we'll start taking a look at the metrics and seeing how their business is running. And then we start a dialogue. Do they understand how their business is running? And we start to walk through, what they've done well and what areas they may have for a need within their business.
Okay, that's pretty clear. Thank you. So, Jeff, back to you. Can you talk about maybe a common myth about coaching that maybe you could debunk? Because I know that a lot of times, especially entrepreneurs, are a little bit resistant because they feel like, what's somebody else going to come in and know more about my business than I know myself? But I'm aware that you are somewhat open to coaching, or even a fan of coaching, if I may. So tell our listeners a little bit about this maybe a common myth about coaching.
Well, it's interesting. That's a great question. I have actually had some business coaching through my career as I've taken on different industries and different things. I think there's a myth that, if you're bringing in a coach or you're seeking advice that you don't know it all, that you need help. I think it's the opposite. I think it helps take you to the next level. So it's funny. When we first bought this business, just to give our listeners an idea, we took ownership of it 2019, November 17th, a week before peak. I wasn't the one that was originally slated to oversee this business operation. It was another one of our execs. I then was asked with my 30 years plus of business experience to oversee it about mid-January, about 2 months later. And we came into this, running straight into peak, buying it from an owner that had overseen it a long time, and we had some fixing to do in the business. And I think everybody probably listening to this call can realize there's been so much growth and change within FedEx. It was, oh my God, there's a lot going on. It's a simple business, but there's so many moving parts. There's so much to this. So if I was going to debunk a myth, I'd have to say, I think people put that stigma on it that if I reach out for help, oh my God, I need help, but I don't have enough to offer. Again, my point would be, I think it not only helps you in the moment, it helps you long-term strategically and helps take you to the next level.
Well, I can appreciate that because I'm a fan of it myself and know a lot of coaches out there who do a wonderful job and a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs who benefit from having coaches. So, Sean, let me ask you, talk to our listeners who may be the operations managers like yourself about the time required in coaching, how much time you spend preparing, how frequently do you talk, and something like that, just about the experience overall that you've experienced.
Certainly. Dave and I typically talk once a week, and we have a standing 1-hour session scheduled. I know, though, that if something were to happen, I could probably reach out to Dave and get either a response by email to a question that I might have, or even if he has the time, he has on more than one occasion been able to pick up the phone, talk me through something. We could have an extra session if the need arises. I think that's what the coaching is all about. The coaching I've seen from Dave and from another gentleman, Bob, there at eTruck Biz, has been that they are receptive and willing to help. They're happy to help because they have been in our shoes before, and they've got the knowledge. And I appreciate not only that they know what they're talking about, but they have a genuine desire to see that we're successful. That's the point. And going back to the topic of seeking coaching and any stigma behind it, I don't see it as something that, it doesn't show that you're deficient or lacking. If you're looking for coaching, it's like Jeff said, you may very well want to step up your game or maybe solve a problem that you haven't encountered before. And I think what helps with coaching is that so far, at least in my experience, the coaching I've gotten has helped me discover the things that I'm strong at and translate that into perhaps a different industry that I wasn't familiar with or a different approach that I might not have tried in the past. So those things are invaluable. I think most people have a lot of fantastic skills, and sometimes it's just a question of finding a way to unlock those skills for the current environment or whatever the current problem is. As far as the time that we spend together, I think about what Dave says throughout the week. That's the beauty of it. I make a lot of notes. I review them to see, okay, these are the things we talked about. How can I implement that? Or what are the things I'm focusing on? What are the potential solutions that Dave has proposed? And I think about that as I go through my week and do my business. I could say that a person honestly can do as much or as little as they choose. It's really up to them. You make out of the situation what you want. I really enjoy our talks when we get together. I'd like to be prepared in coming into it, so I want to make sure that any questions that Dave might have had for me or things he considered that, I did not before, so I evaluate that before going into it and give him feedback. Hey, this is what worked, this was what didn't. Or if Dave had a suggestion from the prior conversation, I'll think about it beforehand, and so when we get back together, I can tell them this worked, or that didn't apply. It wasn't necessarily the best solution, but the information was well received, and I can file it away for later. So really, a person can spend as much or as little time as they want on it. Like I said, I like to come into meetings prepared, so I like to prep a little bit in advance. But I don't see it as being something that a person would need to spend hours on each week. Again, it's what you make of it. If you want to learn from it, you can incorporate what you've talked about in the sessions. Or if you feel like, hey, it's just a way to get some refresher, I guess you could treat it like that too. Depends on the individual.
Thank you for your candor about your coaching sessions. So, Dave, turning back to you, what are maybe top 3 coaching goals? Because I know when businesses have coaches, consultants, et cetera, that they have some goals in mind, something they're trying to accomplish. So what are 3 relevant, the most common goals in this business?
Well, it can be a variety, and there's actually 5 pillars that we look at, and we let the client set what goals they're trying to strive for. Every business is different, so they all have different goals they may be struggling with or things that they're strong at, just like Sean just mentioned. Everybody's got different strengths. The 5 pillars we look at is the leadership, strategy, and structure. Who is in leadership? How do they hand off to each other? In this case, Jeff and Sean. How do they communicate with each other? Who's handling what roles and responsibilities? That's our first pillar, leadership, strategy, and structure. Then the second area is safety. The whole goal of this business is to get everybody home safe and make sure that all of the drivers protect the public and deliver the packages safely. So that pillar goes without saying. A lot of times that pillar is the first and most important, but we'll move back and forth to spend time and attention on that. The third and probably the most significant one right now is people. A lot of changes in the economy, a lot of changes in jobs, a lot of changes in the labor pool. It's how are your people systems supporting the operation? What do you do spending time on recruiting? How are you bringing people on board and bringing them into the CI Express culture, for example? How do you make sure they really get engaged and understand, as Jeff was talking about the mission of what CI Express has a great story behind it. Do they understand and do they fit into that? Then from there, in the people element is, do you train and equip your people really well? How does that work? And as you can imagine in operation, there's all kinds of things that can go on in training. When you move into the 4th pillar, operations, 2 major metrics there that we look at with customers is stops per route. The engineering, did they get enough work on the individual routes for the day so they can be profitable? And then the second thing is applying the methods. How many stops per hour are they running so they can deliver efficiently? Are their drivers equipped to bring the truck back in efficiently, safely, and with good methods in a reasonable time frame? And then the final pillar is what most people are in business for, is to turn a profit. How do all the other things we just described in the other 4 pillars translate into their financials and their results? And fedexground is a great business that has a lot of key metrics you can look at every day in the operation, and you can understand and see directly what the impact to your financial results are. So a little more than the 3 priorities, but within those 5 pillars, that's the framework that we look at, and depending on the client, depends on which area they may need to improve on or an area they may be struggling with. Those are where the client will set those priorities for how we go about it.
Well, thank you for the explanation, Dave. I know our listeners will appreciate the clarity for that. So, Jeff, turning back to you, is there something that maybe was an unexpected challenge that CI Express faced specifically, or maybe an outcome that you didn't expect, or something that you think you could relate to our listeners that they would find interesting as it regards your coaching experience with this in this business?
Yeah, to speak to that, it's interesting. There's so much similarities between different businesses, and this one is very similar to a lot of the businesses that I've overseen and that we have within our organization. You're always looking for leverage. You're empowering and giving ownership to your staff. You know, what are the metrics? What are the processes? What are the methods? You're trying to find good talent. You're doing these things. but this is interesting. This is an easy business, but there sure is a lot of moving parts. And I think when we stepped into it, my God, we stepped into it a week before peak. There were some things that we had to fix and work on within the business, and there's been so much darn change within this industry. We've been in this business now 17 months. Seems like forever, but it's only been 17 months. And in the 17 months of the oversight that I've been involved, we've added vetters to each truck. We had to get new scanners, e-commerce smart posts. We switched from a 5-day to a 6-day terminal, DRO. We look at a new contract with FedEx, and I go blurry-eyed. And, you've got all this stuff going on, and you go, this is so similar to other businesses, but there's a lot of uniqueness and a lot of moving parts to this business. And not to toot the horn of Dave or just eTruck this, but I'm a big believer in using leverage. And whether that's with good talent staff or using key people like Dave or eTruck Biz to support us. I do the same thing in our shred industry, and we run a massive regional shred company here in the Northwest, but we look to people to help us. What is that leverage? What are those industry consultants and companies that can help us and consult with us and give us support to run it right, and go to the next level. So I think it's been a growing experience, but we're not over the hump, the curve yet. But by God, we've come a long way, and now we're looking for growth, different things, maybe different areas, routes and such. But I think that's the biggest thing. It's a simple business, a lot of moving parts, and you sure need good people around you, good staff, good talent, empower them, give them ownership, and then look for leverage with external resources, coaching. I'm big on that. I think that can help you in the moment, which we needed some help initially, but get our feet on the ground, and long-term strategically. So there's so much we've learned. I mean, you could talk for an hour on it, but I guess simply put, those are kind of my thoughts.
Appreciate that, Jeff. Speaking of good leaders, good employees, like you mentioned, Sean, let's switch back to you. Looking in hindsight, is there something in the coaching you wish you had known sooner, something you would have done differently sooner?
I think coming from a different industry into this one, I wish I personally had known more about the industry coming in, but that was the beauty of the coaching sessions. It took a while. It takes lots of time, especially since I myself came in right at the start of a peak season. I was handling a lot of day-to-day, making sure the operations just kept rolling. And at the same time, I was trying to learn the ins and outs of fedexground, how the industry works, what we needed to do to be a successful business. There was a lot to absorb. I think if I could have, I would have liked to have gotten maybe a crash course in FedEx before, I hit the ground on day one. That being said, if you have a particular need and you're looking at coaching as perhaps a solution, I would just be as upfront about that specific need as possible. I think Jeff did that initially when he began coaching with eTruck Biz, and it made a world of difference. He got answers to questions that really made an impact on not just the day-to-day, but the long-term planning. And then as I came in and started learning, we focused on specific challenges that we were facing, things like how to optimize DRO, how to do scheduling, and that helped get through immediate concerns and challenges so that we could start looking longer term. So again, I would say know what your need is, clearly express that need to the coach you're working with, and work on those solutions. Try to get that stuff nailed down. That other stuff comes. It was a challenge. It was a lot to take in, especially during that busy time. But we got through it, and honestly, I feel stronger about the business now, having gone through it that way. And I'm truly appreciative of all the help I got from other contractors, from eTruck Biz, especially from Jeff, who is a great mentor for me. We have done a lot of coaching just like I've done with eTruck Biz, and that's made a big difference in how I feel about work, how I approach work. So coaching isn't just one thing. It's maybe not just a business relationship with an outside vendor like it can be with eTruck Biz. I would encourage people to see coaching as an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow, whether it be with a consultant like eTruck Biz, where you can get deep into the industry and learn a lot of fascinating and useful things that are specific to your industry, or even if that means finding someone in your sphere that might be able to help you grow personally or grow as a leader or whatever that you're looking for. Look for that person to be there for you, to help you, because those people are out there. Dave is always energetic, ready to go, and has been an immeasurable help to our business. So I say coaching is the way to go.
Solid advice, Sean. Thank you. I won't keep you gentlemen forever. We'll start wrapping up here in just a minute. But before we go, Jeff, what advice would you have for our listeners considering coaching for their own operations?
Well, I got to tell you, I think I said it earlier. I think you need to look for leverage and make those investments in the right people and give them the right resources, right? Give people the right resources to be successful. So I'll tell you, if somebody's thinking about their business, maybe they're doing okay and they want to go to the next level. Maybe they're not doing okay. I would really suggest getting some coaching, some industry experts to invest into you and your business to support yourself as an owner or an exec, whatever position you may hold, and to build up your team, your BCs, your managers, your supervisors, your drivers lead. I've got to tell you, I've been in other industries, and I've reached out to industry consultants, experts, coaching, and we would not be where we're at in those other business lines without that support and that help from external sources. And to be perfectly frank, who knows if we would even made it in this business without that support. And not just to toot Dave or eTruck Business horn, we needed some help. There was a lot of things moving. There was a lot to do. There was a lot of fixing that needed to be had. We needed that support, and thank God. I mean, I was looking for leverage and help to support us in those early days to get our feet on the ground. Now I'm looking for that support, and for myself and exec using Dave and eTruck Biz and that coaching to take us to the next level strategically and for our growth. So, well, I got to tell you, make the investment. I'm so big on making the investment and using that leverage with your business. So I couldn't say enough about it.
Appreciate your sentiments there, Jeff. Dave, as a final question, what do you see for the future regarding coaching?
Well, as the complexity and distractions continue to demand everybody's attention, I just see an ever-growing need for some type of support or clarity. It's really hard and difficult to try and keep up with all the changes that are going on and make sense of it. One of the key things in coaching is versus consulting, where we would come in and maybe give you an operating plan and say, here, go execute this. In coaching, we work really hard to listen, communicate thoroughly so we can understand the situation, what the skills and talents of everyone is, and then we can move quickly to exploring options to implement. So that way you can get on the path towards success. It's just the speed of business is moving faster and faster. There's a continuing need to evaluate and understand what those changes are. And then with all the distractions going on, to really meet people where they're at, honor their strengths and skills, even maybe their fears, and help them walk through to see a clear path forward. I think there's only going to be a continuing need for coaching.
Dave, appreciate you saying that. And to all three of you, if we can help just one person out by way of this podcast, then we've spent our time well. And speaking of time, I knew you guys are busy and have packages to handle and work to be done, so we'll go on and wrap up. I just want to say thank you for your time today. Thank you, the three of you, for joining us.
Thanks for allowing
You're
us
welcome.
to share.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, to our listeners, please join us on our next episode